about Revelations, you know what I'm saying? Revelations 12. You know what I mean? At birth, I was given the name.
Peace. Here we go. Another day from the desk of Apocalypse, Dogs of God's Entertainment, with a quick word of reflection, welcoming you again to this episode, to this season, Walking the Road to Recovery, 9 Steps in Motion. And we're going to talk briefly about step number 4 in our journey towards recovery. Look, step number 3 is out with the old. So naturally, step number 4 is in with the new. Look, put on the new man. You know, the scripture talk about being born again. Well, can you go back in your mother's womb? No. However, that's something that that's an analogy we want to look at, because when we're striving to become a new person, it's just like being a newborn baby. You know, because if you spent so much time a certain way and now you're ready to become new and you're ready to shed off, you know what I mean, that way, then hey, it's brand new. It's new to you. And you know, two things can't occupy the same space at one time. You know, so now how would you treat a newborn baby? You know what I mean? What kind of protection would that child be under if you had charge over a newborn baby? See, this is how we have to guard ourselves, really, between these ears, because everything happens here first. Everything happens in the mind first. And so, and then we can't sleep on what's already in there. See, that's the old person. It's already there. So there's a door to the new mind that, you know, this is an analogy. There's a door to the new mind that we are working to establish, that you have to have a guard, a sentinel on deck at that door to make sure nothing is allowed in that's going to ill affect this process, this drive towards, this desire to, this will, this strong will, man, to become new. You know what I'm saying? In with the new. You know, I'll use this and we'll get right to step number 4. Look, I learned from the great Nana Kwesi back in the day, Allah rest his soul. He had a class called the Black Man Story class, right? And he talked about the establishment of a new world for yourself, right? And in that process, he talked about the basic needs: physical, spiritual, intellectual, psychological, emotional, and economic. So these are basic needs. We all have basic needs in these areas, you know. And physical, it, you know, of course, a lot of us, and you may look at yourself and say, like, hey, right now I need to get stronger on my workout. I need to get back on my dean, on my workout. You know what I'm saying? That's one thing. You know how people say, well, man, I need to lose some weight, or I want to get more lean and strong in front. or whatever the case, but that's personal, you know what I'm saying? But when in terms of relationships, in terms of this new world that we're talking about establishing, then you have the ability to allow people in your new world, and you can put people out of your new world at least until you get to a point where you're strong and firm in the direction that you're going. See, that's how it was for me when it was time, or when I was in the process of going through these steps. Yeah, you get to a point where you feel like you gotta cut some folks back so you can get focused on where you're striving to go. Yeah, that's true. But then you realize that, whoa, man, I'm just as bad without them. So hey, I realize that the condition that I'm in and the condition that I have to go to war against is all internal. And once I get that straight, I can deal with what's going on outside of me, And so that's the whole point. Like, okay, now you allow people in based on their ability to satisfy, to a degree, something in these basic needs. Like, a physical need could just be a handshake, a pat on the back. You know what I mean? Hey man, keep it going. Keep it going. Like, you're doing a great job. But spiritual, emotional, psychological, if somebody is in your world, that you have allowed somebody in your world, and then you start doing a survey, and I won't call it what Nana Crazy called it, but I'll just say you got a bucket right here. Here with a bucket. You know what I mean? So, okay, then you're examining this one person. Okay, wow. Physically, spiritually, physically, spiritually, psychologically, intellectually, economically, and emotionally. Are they doing anything for me in these areas while I'm striving to go to this next phase of my life? Nah. Okay, put them in the bucket. Put them in the bucket. Now, putting them in the bucket, they don't necessarily have to stay in the bucket. But while you're working on this new person, while you're establishing this new person, that's a distraction, man. Put them in the bucket. You know what I'm saying? Look, love you. And, you know what I'm saying? But for now, your phone ring and it's them. They in the bucket. You know what I'm saying? They in the bucket. And you can let them know in your own way that, look, I'm focused on something right now. I'm moving in this direction. I have to really put myself in this, all the way in this process, so that I can get to the next phase in my growth and development. And remember, you're an infant. You're an infant. So you're not going to be as strong in this area of your life yet until you get some wins in your life. You got to get some W's, man. You've had a whole lot of L's, So until you get enough wins and you get strong enough to stand on your own 2 feet in a certain aspect of your life, you get a grip on this demon, these drugs, you know what I'm saying? And you get 30 days in, you can get 60 days in, you get 90 days in. For me, the magic number was 90 days, Now you standing strong, but you still have to be careful because that's only 90 days. For me, again, it was 14 years using drugs. You know what I mean? So 90 days is nothing to 14 years, right? So you're still a baby. You know what I mean? So just consider these kinds of things, when you are establishing this new world, this new life for yourself. So that's enough from me. We're going to get right into step number 4, or episode number 4 of Walking the Road to Recovery, 9 steps in motion from the depths of apocalypse. Our big brother Hashim Hakeem is going to take us away. Go ahead and get him. Get him, brother Hashim. Peace.
In with the new. Revelations chapter 21, verse 5 and 5. Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. Before we get into this step, let's reiterate a point that we used at the close of step 3. I remember lasting 2, 3, and even 4 weeks without using drugs in the process of getting rid of the old me. Then, all of a sudden, I realized something very important that I will note here. I will use an illustration to explain. At the time, I was in my early 20s. So imagine a 20-year-old standing outside of your door with a ski mask on wearing a black hoodie. He's hiding behind the bush, waiting for this 4-week-old new you to walk out of the house. As soon as you open the door and take one step out, he begins to attack and says, You know what it is, punk. Who is going to win this fight? More than likely, this is an easy win for the 20-year-old. My point is that you have to constantly guard yourself against the old you. The old you knows your every move. The old you knows exactly when to attack. This is a very crucial step in this journey. In with the new is one of the greatest turning points because it has to be viewed as a new beginning. It's like pouring dirty water out of a glass. Before you put clean water in, you have to clean and sanitize the glass to get a clean, pure drink of water. So now that we have made it clear to the old you that they are no longer welcome, you have a lot of time on your hands. The process of getting rid of the old you clears a lot of time and space in your day-to-day life. This is where real understanding has to come into play. Step 1, make the decision. It's constant. In the Lord's Prayer, it says, Give us this day our daily bread. The decision has to be made day by day. It's like a base that lays the foundation of the journey. Step 2, find the love is also a constant. When we explore the depths of this word love, it takes us much deeper than the emotional aspect, usually equated with love. In the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan study guide 18 titled, Rising Above Emotions into the Thinking of God, it reads, quote, We must not narrow love to an emotional reaction. But when we say God is love, the word is represented by the equal symbol. Then love has to be complete. Because God is not an emotion. All of his attributes are embodied in the creative force we call love. An intense like for something is only one of its manifestations. Now, with all of this time on your hands, after clearing out all of that space to welcome the new you, old habits have to be replaced with new good habits. There's a saying that it takes 21 days to break a habit. Drug addiction is a bad habit. But wait, before you start counting your days, know and understand that the act of using drugs is the manifestation or the end result of something that went wrong in the mind. Whether we're truly aware of this fact at the time really doesn't matter. What's important is that we know this to be the case while on the road to recovery. Being aware of the thoughts flowing through our minds is very important because you are familiar with the old you. You know the thinking of the old you. You must be able to stop that person at the door and not allow them in. So, these steps are like working out. You can't go to the gym and get a good workout in and think, I did it. Then expect to walk out of the gym lean and mean? Stop it. You already know that's not how it works. It's all right to count your days, just know that every aspect or step in this process has to collectively work on you to experience a true forward motion. Starting the process is key because the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. But you have to keep on stepping to get results. And seeing results feeds the desire to continue. Of course, with working out, you start to see muscles that you never knew existed. Or you eventually see the fat start to trim away. However, in this journey, you start feeling better about yourself. You start seeing a new glow in your countenance. You start feeling brand new. And you grow to love the very feeling of the change taking place. In with the new is like building blocks. It's like making a whole new person. Becoming new is literally establishing a whole new world for yourself. You become a student of your own journey. You begin learning more about yourself because you really start to pay more attention to what you know and things you thought you knew. I remember being back in the church and going down the aisle for altar prayer. Guess what? I didn't know how to pray. So I was peeking out of my eyes and the brother next to me said, "Yes." So I said, "Yes." The brother in front of me said, "Thank you." So I said, "Thank you." After prayer, I went back to my seat. I was so confused. I really cannot tell what had just taken place. They would say things like, "I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me." And "God is in me, with me, through me, and for me. And where God is, there can be no imperfection." I would repeat this stuff all the time and still smoke the night away. This brings me back to that talk with my Uncle Paul Armstrong. God rest his soul. I read Romans chapter 7, and we have the discussion that changed my life. In that scripture, Apostle Paul said, starting at Romans chapter 7, verse 21, "I find then a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into the captivity of the law of sin which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, with the mind I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh, the law of sin." I find it very interesting that my uncle's name was Paul. However, Apostle Paul is pointing out the duality of man. He is pointing out at our human nature that deals with the urges and appetites of the flesh. And he is making us aware of the higher power housed in our flesh, the mind. This can be illustrated as the mind being imprisoned by the urges of the flesh. Paul is giving us the origin of the battle. This is where the war begins. This encounter put me in touch with my dual nature. It gave me an understanding of the flesh and spirit. The whole idea of gaining knowledge of self had become much clearer. I began to understand that the mind as it relates to the body, and the body as it relates to the mind. This understanding gave me power. It became clear that the body was nothing but a series of urges and appetites that the mind has complete control over once the power of the mind is understood. So, a new way of thinking is most important in this step. It's still a challenge, it's still a struggle, but things are getting clear. The question becomes, what can you do with your time now that you are cleaning up your life? I'm a musician. And being in the church, my mind was determined to work my way into the musician's corner in the church. So I started singing in different choirs only to work my way over to the bass guitar. I attended just about every service there was to keep my mind in a better place. Once they heard me play bass, I was locked in as a musician. That was a most pleasurable escape. Outside of the church, I started writing lyrics and producing music. Sometimes they would allow us to express our gifts during the part of service, called inspiration or expression. All of this fed into the new man I was striving to become. These experiences also made me feel so much better about myself and how my life could be used to positively affect others. Learning the duality of self along with the power of suggestion gave clarity to what Reverend Wilson meant when he said, "Pray as if everything depends on God, and work as if everything depends on you." It caused me to reflect on Genesis, where dominion and power was given to man. Well, at least that's how I processed it. But it all clicked one day, after struggling with being clean for a week, back on drugs. Clean for 2 weeks, back on drugs. Clean for a month, back on drugs. I managed to make it to that magic number. For me, which was 90 days clean from drugs. I was laying down, smoking a cigarette, listening to a cassette tape of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He said something that I heard before, but it was something about this time that set me in motion. He said, the body is the temple of God. And you wonder why your prayers are not being answered. You pray to God and then you cloud your temple up with smoke. This was the last straw. I was already 90 days clean from the crack, weed, PCP, and alcohol. I put that cigarette out and never returned to smoking, drinking, or drugging again. In with the new. It all clicked. The beginning stage of a new mind began to form. A new mind is, in fact, a new man. I once heard the minister say, there is nothing more powerful than a made-up mind. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 23 and 24 say, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And you can put on the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. I will close this step with this story. Prior to this breakthrough, while in the process of deciding to make a change, the great Deacon Julius Jackson, God rest his soul, stood up and testified in front of the congregation. I had been up all night lacing PCP joints with crack cocaine. He said, it's been 15 years since I've drugged or drank. And the congregation went crazy. While they were clapping and shouting, my mind started playing tricks on me. I looked up at Brother Jack and literally saw myself for a few seconds standing in his place. It felt so good. And when I snapped out of it, I said, I want that feeling again. In my mind, that was my first time in a long time seeing myself off drugs. Now, some may read this and say that the hallucinations that I smoked all night before church had me tripping. That could very well be the case, but I learned something of the power of the mind to realize what's imagined. The feeling was real. It reminds me of the study guide 18 that I mentioned earlier. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches where emotions come from. He states, the brain is not only an organ of intellect and logic, it is also the source of emotion. Emotions are brought to life in what is known as the limbic system. The limbic system is a collection of parts that constitute approximately 20% of the brain's area. The forces of pride, fear, joy, grief, anger, lust, hatred, envy, jealousy arise from this region of the brain. So, the feeling of joy over the thought of being 15 years clean was captured. And just like that first hit of crack cocaine is the feeling that produces that never-ending chase, my mind was set to get that feeling of joy in that moment as a reality in my life. In with the new. Visualize the new person you are striving to become. Internalize how it feels as this new person. Act as if it has already taken place and embrace the feeling. However, do not get spooky. Know and understand that you are merely exercising your mind, heart, and soul. This can be viewed as a mental and spiritual workout. Believe in yourself to accomplish the goal to become new, keeping the thought in mind that mere belief accounts for nothing except carried into practice. There is a lot that has transpired up until this point in the journey. Consider there has been much more deprogramming taking place as well as reprogramming. This means that there is so much information that you have discovered of yourself that you may not have viewed in the manner that you see things now. It's almost like a big screenplay being played out on the big screen at the box office. The key is to know how to process what you are discovering, good or bad. All data is to give us a better knowledge of how we are being developed to become what we intend to be in this life. This brings us to the next step. Process.